more moments until more people join. So please say hello and let us know where you're from. Oh, there's so many people joining. This chat box is moving so quickly. It's brilliant to see. So we've got people from Russia, from Thailand, Iran, Romania, Greece, the Philippines, Albania, Italy, Oman. Wow, all over the world. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really wonderful to have you all here. So we'll give it 30 seconds or so. We've still got more people joining. Oh, Azerbaijan. Wow, fantastic. Mexico. So it's the morning here in the UK on a grey, drizzly day. So depending where you are in the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you're all well. It's so fantastic to have so many of you join us today. Egypt, China, wow. A global webinar. Wow, wonderful. Okay, I think people are still joining. Overcast in Italy too. Oh dear. Doesn't make it as nice to look out the window, does it, in your breaks? Oh. Spain. Brilliant. Brazil. Okay. So welcome everybody. As I said, it's so wonderful to see so many of you joining us here for our webinar. My name is Donia Estafanos. I work for Cambridge Assessment English as an exam support manager. So I help to support teachers, parents, learners by creating materials to help you support your learners in excelling in their Cambridge exams. So today's webinar is about preparing your students online for Cambridge English qualifications, and we're going to be focusing on the speaking paper. So due to the current climate, we're delivering this webinar to you in a slightly different way. Like most of you, we're working from home, but we're aiming to give you the best experience we can. We are relying on home Wi-Fi, so please bear with us if we have any issues. Before we start, just a few suggestions to help you get the most out of today's session. So first of all, we recommend that you use headphones to get a better quality of audio so that you can hear me better. And try not to have anything else running, especially Skype. So switch off all other programs if you can, and this should avoid any crashing. And don't worry if the picture is a little bit blurry at first. That's because we're live streaming and hopefully it will improve. So during the webinar, you'll be able to use the chat box on the right, as you all are, to say hello. So you'll find any handouts or questions in this area too. And please use the chat box if you want to type any questions throughout the webinar. If it's something that we can answer straight away, we'll type an answer to you, and we'll keep some questions for the Q&A session at the end. So don't worry if your question isn't answered. And remember to ask some questions at the end. I'll tell you when to start typing them. And we're going to be using the chat box for activities during the session. You will be getting a certificate at the end of the webinar, and the certificate, as well as the slides and a handout and a link to the recording, will be sent to you after the webinar. So don't worry if you miss anything, okay? So if you're ready, let's get started. So the aims for today, in this webinar, we're going to be looking first of all at your current situation, understanding a bit about your context and particular challenges that you might be facing in teaching, particularly speaking. We're going to try and group those challenges and provide 4 main principles for you to consider when teaching online that you can take away with you. So, of course, with those principles, you're going to need some practical activities that you can apply in your classes. And I'll also be sharing resources that we have to help you with your classes. We have lots of exciting new resources for you, including some brand new lesson plans which have been designed to help you teach your classes online. So I'll be giving you lots more information about those in this webinar. So I mentioned that we're going to start with your current situation and your context. So depending on where you're based in the world, and as we've seen, you're all over the world, you're at different stages of this coronavirus lockdown. But I think something that we all have in common is most of us have been teaching now online for at least a month. So on that assumption, this webinar is assuming that you are familiar with the platform that you're using already, that you've got to know it, that you understand the functions, and now you're one step ahead looking at how to develop your lessons a bit more. So on that note, I'd like to start with what this webinar is not, and it's not going to be a step-by-step guide to using different digital tools in your classroom or going through functions of the platform, okay? There are so many resources out there with different tools, fantastic resources, which I'm sure you've spent a lot of time looking through and working out. So I won't be covering those in this webinar. Of course, I will be using some tools and referring to some, and all the information about those will be available to you. So this webinar is really about going back to basics, looking at skills and language that your students need to develop in order to excel in their Cambridge English speaking exams. And we'll be looking at how we as teachers can ensure that we're still delivering useful, practical, engaging lessons to support our students through this time while we're teaching them remotely. So on that note, I'm going to show you some opinions, some feelings from different teachers, okay? I'm going to give you some time to read them, and then I'm going to ask you afterwards if you can relate to any of these. So I'm not going to read them out to you. I'll give you a moment to read it. Teacher 2. Here is teacher 3. Writing some comments already, good. And teacher 4. Okay, so some of you are already sharing your opinions, brilliant. So do you share the feelings, the same feelings as these teachers? You can just type the number, or do you have any different opinions? How are you finding teaching online, and specifically speaking? Oh, there's a whole range here. 1, 2, all of them. Absolutely all of them. Okay. And do you have any other opinions that you'd like to add to this? Are there any other challenges that you're finding in your classes that you can add that these teachers haven't mentioned? Very overwhelming. Okay, good. Well, not good. Good to have another option. Lots of you are saying it's exhausting. Okay, somebody says it's brilliant, less interactive. They can cheat. Okay. Students are less motivated, teacher-centered. Okay, so lots of common themes are coming up there. Too much sitting. That's a very good point, actually. It does get tiring sitting down, doesn't it? You have to plan more carefully. Planning takes longer. Okay. Feedback is hard. It's exciting. Good. So some positive responses too. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. So it is important to be aware of the challenges in order to find solutions. So it's a very important activity to take part in. So here I have grouped the main challenges that we've heard from teachers. So I think all of these have been mentioned by you in the chat box already. Setting up activities, managing interaction, getting through lesson plans. Lesson plans are taking longer. So really, we need to find ways to address these challenges because unlike in a face-to-face classroom where language is the focus, teaching online does present other areas that can contribute to the mental load, to the mental challenge of learning English. So even things like you've mentioned, learning how to use new tools and technology, just making sure the audio is working, having to concentrate really hard on what the teacher is saying, understanding instructions. And of course, that's more challenging because so much of our communication is non-verbal, it's not spoken. You pick up things from body language, from facial expressions, from those kind of cues, which are much more challenging to get online. So of course, it does make the mental load that much more, making it harder to concentrate in our classes. Absolutely. Students are now having to multitask, aren't they? They're not sitting in the classroom and looking at you and listening. They're looking at different parts of the screen, they're clicking, they're opening windows and going through menu options. This can definitely put an additional strain on their cognitive language, on their cognitive load. So it's not just about learning English anymore. And it's not just about teaching English either from our point of view as teachers. So what can we do? What can we do to overcome these challenges? So I'm going to go through now 4 main principles, which I'd like you to take from this webinar, which will help you to address some of these challenges mentioned. Okay. So the 4 main principles that we're going to look into are: number 1, lightening the cognitive load. Number 2, keep it simple. Number 3, provide opportunities for interaction and personalization. And number 4, give feedback. Okay, sounds simple? You might be thinking, yes, of course, we know we have to do these things, but how? How can we do these things? So that we're going to look into each of these principles in a little bit more detail and look at some ideas of how we can do these. All right. So, having a look, here we have a poll for you. Online teaching presents a much higher cognitive load on our students. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Or are you just not sure? You don't really know. Okay. So this poll is based on the idea that teaching online, as we've just discussed, is more mentally challenging for our students than in a face-to-face classroom. So do you agree with this or not? Let's have a look. So we've got our poll here. Okay, so far we have about 75% of you agree. Oh, it's going up. Okay, just under 10% disagree. Interesting, okay. And about 15% of you don't really know. Maybe you haven't considered it or, yeah, just not sure. Okay, interesting. So about 75% of you agree. Interesting, the 9% who don't agree. I wonder. I suppose maybe it's not that it's more challenging, it's just different. So students are having to think of different things rather than just focusing on the language. It's a different kind of cognitive challenge, isn't it? Okay. So let's move on and have a look at how we can lighten the cognitive load. Principle number 1, lighten the load. So first of all, empathize with your students. Just showing your students that you understand how difficult it is and how different it is learning online to a face-to-face classroom can really go a long way. You know, be patient and understanding if students have more questions than usual or take longer to do everything. It's likely that they may take longer to do things because they're thinking about and processing all the information and the instructions and what they have to do. Scaffolding. This might sound like something you do in your regular classes. So you're offering support. You're not giving demanding tasks right away. You're providing steps to make an activity easier. Okay, so you're breaking your tasks up into stages, into shorter stages, which are more manageable so that students can keep up. Vary the length of your interactions. So think about the activities that you're setting. Are they really long that students are going to find it difficult to concentrate? Are they really short that you don't give students enough time to actually think about what they're doing and prepare for what they're doing, and then they miss the whole activity? So it can be quite tricky in balancing the activities, making sure that you give them enough time to understand what they're doing, think about what they're doing and do it, versus giving them loads of time and they get really bored and stressed and they get a headache from staring at the screen. Okay, so my next point, I've blanked out some words. Can you guess what those words are? Include something on the board as well as spoken instructions. What do you think is under that blue box? What are your ideas? Visualization, prompts, examples. Oh, good ideas. Written, keywords. Aha. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, so here I've written instructions, but I love your suggestions of images, prompts, really good ideas, key points. So the reason behind this, as we mentioned, trying to concentrate on what your teacher's saying can be difficult. Perhaps their audio will cut out, or your parent, your mum or dad might walk into the room and start hoovering, and then you've missed what your teacher said. So by having instructions on the board as well can offer that extra layer of support. Okay. And then, if possible, set some tasks that take students away from their screen. It's so tiring staring at your screen all day. Are there any activities that you can set that take students away from their screen at any point in the lesson? And tell students what is coming next in the next lesson. So it's about, again, providing that support, letting them know what's coming so they can prepare. Okay. All right, principle number 2, keep it simple. So again, I've got a missing word. What do you think it is? Adapt, don't. Adapt, don't. What do you think? Panic. That's good advice. Don't panic. Don't be rigid. Don't give up. That is good advice. Don't give up. Don't worry. These are all very reassuring statements, which I think are very nice and important for us to remember, actually. Don't worry. It's okay. Don't improvise. Oh, okay. Let me show you what I've written. Don't reinvent. Okay. So when I say don't reinvent, I mean try not to get too overwhelmed. So don't worry, but try not to get too overwhelmed by all of the new information out there. There is so much information and it's impossible to get through all of it. You don't need to learn about every single digital tool that exists. You don't need to cram 6 different tools into your lesson because it's an online lesson. So you should be using techie tools. If you find tools and digital tools that are useful and helpful and support learning, then fantastic, use them. But don't stress about using too many, okay? That's not the most important thing. The most important thing is supporting your learners in developing their language, okay? So it's about assessing the best way to teach students that language, whether it's using a digital tool or not using a digital tool. Don't give too many handouts, somebody says as well. That's good advice, actually, because especially online, it can be difficult to get all that information to them. And it's a lot more preparation for you. So it's about, staying realistic, keeping it simple, using what you already have. If you have course books, use those course books because students have those course books. So that's less new material, fewer new materials that you have to create yourself, okay? So assess what you have and what you can use before you start looking at everything else that exists out there. Okay. All right. Principle number 3, provide opportunities for personalization and interaction. Okay, so that says interaction at the top. Now, this can be difficult teaching online. We're going to look at some ways that we can overcome this. Just noticed a comment. Somebody says, I'm terrible with computers and this is really getting me down. And that makes me feel quite sad to read that comment. That shouldn't stop you from teaching your classes, okay? Hopefully this webinar will give you some ideas for how you can teach your classes without relying so much on the technology, okay? So motivate your students, build their confidence, help them through this time. You know, not having a classmate next to them that they can just chat to or that they can say, what have I missed? That can have, you know, quite a big effect on a student's motivation. They might feel alone, although we're all there together, they're actually in the room on their own. So help them with this. How can we encourage them to interact? How can we provide opportunities for personalization? So how can we include students in having some responsibility over their learning, making sure that the materials and the language has some relevance to them and their life? And that's something to think about when creating materials and setting tasks. Are these tasks relevant to the learners? Are they engaging? Can students see the point of them? Do they understand why we're doing these tasks? And that will help to motivate and build confidence in your students, okay? And then the fourth principle we have here is give feedback. Give feedback, really important. Even more important online, because as we've said, students feel alone. They're at home looking into this computer. They need to know how they're doing and how they're progressing, what they need to do. So I've got a word missing here. What is the word? Positive, regular, written, useful, instant, targeted. These are all brilliant words. Constructive is coming up a lot. Okay, let's have a look what's under my box. Meaningful feedback. So you can see here we've got the thumbs up and the thumbs down, and actually on a lot of platforms that is a function that you can give a thumbs up or a thumbs down or clapping, and that's really nice just for kind of instant little gratification. Students can do it for each other. They can respond to each other and the teacher can respond to them. But that's not really enough, is it, in terms of developing language? Students want to have meaningful feedback. They want to know maybe mistakes that they've made that they can improve. They want to know if they've said a phrase, if there's another way to say it, a better way to say it. So how can we give meaningful feedback while teaching online? So one way is to have increased peer feedback. So having students give feedback on each other, on each other's work. And also self-assessment, having students become more aware of how they're doing and what they're doing. So how can we train them to assess themselves and become more aware of their level and more aware of how they can improve? Okay, and part of that is having time for students to ask questions, giving them more time to ask how they're doing. Okay, so to sum up this section, we've got our 4 main principles. Lighten the cognitive load, keep it simple, provide opportunities for interaction and personalization, and give feedback. I hope you can remember those. Okay, so now we've looked at the principles, fantastic, and we're going to look at some practical ideas and activities that we can use in our online classroom to support these principles. So let's begin here. We are going back to basics, okay? So here we have a task from the B1 Preliminary for Schools speaking exam, and this is part 2, okay? So we're starting here. We're starting at the point of I'm a teacher and this is what I have to teach my students. We're not starting at the point of I'm teaching online, what tools do I have, what can I put into my classes, okay? What do they need to know? So have a look at these questions in purple to the right. I want you to have a look at the exam task, and I want you to think, what is it that our learners have to do, and what language skills do they need to develop to be able to do this successfully, okay? So you can either think about these answers or type some answers in the chat box. What do learners have to do in this task? What language skills do they need to develop? Okay. So they need to describe, very good, okay. What else do they have to do? What else do they have to do? Okay, lots of you describing a photo, good. Okay, so we know what they have to do. What language skills do they need to develop to be able to do this task? So thinking again about scaffolding, what do we have to teach our students and make sure that they can do in order to be able to do this task successfully? Okay, lots of suggestions. So, to describe a picture, they of course need to know vocabulary. They need to know adjectives to be able to describe the picture. And if they don't know those adjectives, those words, then they need to be able to paraphrase. They need to be able to explain what a word is without using the word. And of course, if they're giving this description, they have to organize their ideas and connect their sentences. So looking at words to link ideas and sentences. So these are the skills that need to be focused on in order for them to do this task successfully. We could just give this task for the students to have a go at, but that would be quite difficult without having taught them all of these skills and language beforehand. Okay, so I mean, we might do this at the end of a course as a mock test or a practice test, or you might do it at the beginning as a diagnostic test to see what our students know and don't know, and then use that information to plan our course. But it's very important that we do break down this task into steps so that they can complete this task. So again, it's about lightening the cognitive load, making the steps small and manageable. So let's have a look at some ideas of how we can do this. So help your students prepare for the lesson. So before the lesson, you could let students know what you're going to be focusing on in that lesson. So here I've just put a little post. This happens to be Microsoft Teams, but depending on what platform you're using, there's often a function to post messages to your students. So here I've just said, hello, like this week we're going to be focusing on describing a picture. You can watch an example here, and I've added a link to the practice speaking test, the part where students describe a picture. So this means that students who perhaps are feel like they're a bit behind or they struggle to keep up in class, they can prepare before the lesson. Now, a lot of you will be teaching, if you're teaching B1 preliminary for schools, teenagers, and there's a chance that they might not do that, either because they have lots of schoolwork or they just don't want to do it. So if you're going to post things, you need to post things that aren't compulsory, that aren't going to affect students if they haven't done them. So, for example, you wouldn't start the lesson by saying, tell me all about the video that you watched, okay? Because that would put the students who didn't watch it at an unfair advantage. So the aim is to support students who need it and want it, but it's not compulsory, okay? It's about helping students, but not putting them at a disadvantage. And then at the start of the lesson, we talked about helping students feel relaxed, helping students feel ready, like they're connected to others in the class, like they're not alone. You know, as they join the call, the class, have a little chat to them, you know, don't sit there in silence. Say, okay, we're going to wait for the other students to come. Because that's not going to do anything towards creating a relaxed environment, which is what we need to achieve, okay? So ask students questions about their day, what they've been doing. If you know they have siblings, you can ask how their siblings are doing. It really does go a long way when teachers show an interest in a student. If you can remember things about them, you know that they have particular hobbies, ask them about those hobbies, and it makes students feel valued and important. So that can go a long way. And as more students join, encourage them to talk to each other. So you could, I've just put some prompts up here on my board, which I share with them. How are you doing today? What have you eaten? What have you watched on TV? Who have you spoken to? And they can just start talking to each other and asking these questions. The more they get used to these questions, you probably won't have to put them up anymore. Hopefully they'll just start doing that naturally, but you can change these questions every day and make it relevant to them as well. Or you could just have a picture on the board or a GIF or a meme or something funny, something to get them talking to each other. And the topics could relate to what's coming in the lesson, again, to get students thinking about vocabulary, or it could just be something funny because you just want them to relax. And yes, very importantly, do check that nobody has problems with their audio or their video at the beginning of the lesson as they join. And check that all the materials can be accessed. If you've uploaded any handouts or any information for them, ask students to check that that can all be accessed at the beginning of the lesson, just to ensure that the rest of the lesson can go a bit more smoothly and you won't have to keep stopping and starting activities. Okay. So we're going to think back to our exam task. So it was describing a picture. And we're going to look at an activity that can be used to help students with this task. So it's about scaffolding lessons again, supporting students step by step. So notice that I'm giving you an instruction. You're going to listen to me. I'm going to describe a picture to you, and you're going to draw it. So notice that I have my instructions on the board as well, and an image. So students who may have been distracted for that moment can refer to those instructions on the board. So let's try this. So those of you that have a pen and a paper, I want you to listen and draw. Those of you who don't have a pen and paper, don't worry. You can build up a mental image in your mind of the picture that I'm describing, okay? Are you ready? Okay. There is a man and a woman standing in a garden behind a barbecue. The woman is wearing an apron and she's holding a glass. The man is also wearing an apron and he's wearing a straw hat. Next to them, there are 2 plates of food. In the background, there's a group of people standing around a table. Okay, I'm going to stop there. In the class, I would go into more detail describing the picture. Have you got your pictures? So I can't see your cameras, otherwise I would ask you to hold them up so I could see them. Okay, this is the picture. How similar is it to your picture? Some comments. I never realized how bad I was at drawing until today. That's okay. That's not the point of the activity. And actually that's quite a nice thing to laugh about if the pictures aren't good. So that's fine. Okay, what did you miss? Did you miss anything out? Oh, quite similar. So we clearly have some great artists watching the webinar today. Okay, good. Now, that was a nice activity. You know, I described the picture. So I presented a model for students. I got students focusing and concentrating, and they had to listen very carefully to me. But it was quite teacher-centered. And one of the things that you've mentioned is challenging is making your lessons less teacher-centered. So how could we then make this less teacher-centered? What could we do next? And how can you personalize this activity? Let's see your ideas. In pairs, okay. How can you make it less teacher-centered? And how can you personalize it? Get students to describe a picture of their own. Ask them to have a go. Yeah. Okay. Students can write dialogues. Okay, if you want them to help them prepare or focus on writing, you could, yeah. Create a story. That's a nice idea. They could look at maybe what's happened before this, why they're having this barbecue, get them to use their imagination. I like that. It's a very good idea. Students bring a photo of their own. Great. Exactly. So you could ask them to get a photo from their course book. That's another great idea. So yes, I mean, you've come up with all the ideas that I have as well. So students could either get a picture from their phone, or you could say, okay, you have 2 minutes and you have to find a picture on the internet to describe related to the theme of celebrations. Or for students who might find that difficult, you could say, look in your course book to find a picture. I think that's a really good idea. And then students can describe their pictures to their partners. So they could do this in the breakout rooms, as some of you have recommended, which is a really good idea. If you can use breakout rooms and ensure that they're monitored safely, then they are a very good way to conduct an activity like this. Obviously, some platforms don't have breakout rooms, or you're not able to monitor them safely if you have younger learners. So another thing you could do is have students make a voice note or a recording. So students could do this on their phones and send it, or I've just shown you one example here of a tool that you can use called Voice Spice. So this is quite good because you don't have to sign up. It doesn't require much setup. You just go to the website, you click record, and you can record your voice. You can listen to it back, and then you can send it in an email, either to your students or to your teacher. Or you can make a link and post it onto the platform. So this is just one option. So what are the benefits of this? So some benefits that I've thought of are, it gives students the chance to prepare. They're not doing it in live time. They can think about it before they record their voice. It can give them some time away from the screen, because you'd say, okay, you need to prepare, and you also need time to record it, and maybe you want to record it 2 or 3 times and choose your favorite recording. So you'd say maybe, okay, you can have 5 or 6 minutes away from the computer to do your recordings, and then bring everybody back. So this means that students can feel more confident about what they're doing, especially if they can record it more than once and they can produce better language every time. And this activity is suitable for all levels. So we're still looking at this B1 preliminary for schools task, but in A2 key for schools and in B2 first for schools, there are speaking activities where students use pictures as prompts. So this activity can be used for all levels, okay, depending on the activity, the task that you're looking at. And in terms of monitoring, the teacher will have that recording that they can keep and listen to and be able to give personalized feedback. And the teacher could either give feedback by recording a voice note herself or himself, or you could write down some feedback and send it to each student. Okay. So as well as the teacher giving feedback, it's also a really nice opportunity to develop peer feedback. So in order to do this, you would create a form. This is quite a simple one that I've created with some success criteria so that students know what it is that they are assessing. So the criteria should be specific to the task, and the teacher would give this to students before they do the task so that they know what they're aiming for, and it will help them with their preparation. And it will help them with their planning too. So this example just has yes, no, not sure. When students are starting to give feedback to their peers, keep it quite simple. And the teacher can see if students are not sure what areas they need more support in identifying. And the sophistication, the difficulty of the feedback and criteria, again, will depend on the level and the task. For a B2 task, for example, you might include more criteria based on the difficulty of the task, okay? There will actually be some webinars in May which focus specifically on assessing students and assessing students online, okay? So for more information on that, look out for those webinars coming in May. And just to let you know, this just says comments and questions. Okay, now let's have a look at a different speaking task. So this is A2 Key for Schools, speaking part 1. So students here have to answer questions individually about a general topic. So again, this is something that students have to do in speaking exams at every level. They're always asked general questions about themselves. It's just that the challenge of the questions change. So all students need vocabulary, and in this case, relating to school, in order to be able to complete this task. So how can we develop vocabulary in a student-centered way? We're going to look at one activity now. Now, I mentioned that we have new lesson plans for teachers teaching online. So this activity has been taken from one of those lesson plans. So here it's a crossword in 2 halves, again on the topic of school, because that's what our exam task is focusing on. So you'll need to put students into pairs and give each person 1 half of the crossword, and you can email it to students or post it on the platform for students to download. And in the lesson plan, you'll see that there are stages leading up to this activity. It's not starting with this, where students revise asking questions and they review useful language and they look at the vocabulary beforehand, okay? So this is like revision testing. So once you've done this, you can put students into breakout rooms if you have them, where they ask each other questions to fill in the crossword. So for example, student A will say, what's 4 across? And here student B is describing the word break time, and they say, it's the best time of day. There are no classes and you can talk to your friends. And student A will say, must be break time, okay? Now, if you don't have breakout rooms, the lesson plans do offer alternatives. If you don't have them, they give you ideas of how you can run these activities. So don't worry, okay? And so notice that this activity is practicing paraphrasing, which again is a really useful skill that students of all levels will need to use in their speaking exams. So how would you monitor this activity? How would you monitor and give feedback? Because monitoring can be difficult in breakout rooms. You're going between the rooms and you might hear little bits of conversations, or you might miss other conversations. And I think actually it's important to acknowledge that it just is difficult and you might miss conversations. So I think the important thing is not to worry too much, not to put too much pressure on yourself as a teacher that you're missing things, and just focus on what you can do. And by varying your activities, by having some things in breakout rooms, some activities where students send in voice notes that you will be able to help them, okay? So in this case, I think a good idea is to go in and out of the breakout rooms and listen to examples of good language that you hear, and listen to language that's wrong or that could be extended or improved, and then hold an error correction stage for the whole class afterwards. So in this case, you can see the teacher has written down the errors in a Word document and then shared it with the students. So this is a nice way of presenting errors because students can look at them and they can think about them individually and try to correct them. So it's important to give students time. Don't just put the errors up and say, okay, who can correct them? Because you'll always have the strongest student shouting out the answers and giving all of the answers. So give students time to think quietly, try to correct the answers, and then you can elicit from students and find out how they can be improved. So staying on the topic of feedback, I'm very interested to hear from you. Which do you find is more useful when you're teaching online and also easier to do? Immediate feedback, where you tell them on the spot, or delayed feedback and error correction, as I've just shown you? I'm interested to hear. So please do vote in the poll. So vote in the poll. You find immediate feedback or delayed feedback? Oh, this is fairly even, the results. That's very interesting. And actually that's encouraging because some of you, so it's slightly more with immediate feedback than delayed feedback. That's really interesting. Just over half. Very interesting. I think, yeah, something to be aware of, because if you're giving immediate feedback in the breakout room, if there's a time lag, I think it depends on your connection, because if there is a time lag, by the time you've heard what the student said and corrected it, they might be a couple of sentences ahead and then they get confused. So if that's an issue in cases like that, then, you know, think about that, write down their errors and present them. If you find that there are ways that you can give immediate feedback and students respond positively, then brilliant. Okay. Okay, now for more information on this, we do have some videos on the digital teacher. So we have some videos about how to give feedback online. So if you are interested, then have a look at the digital teacher. Okay, so we have looked at the 4 main principles. We've looked at some ideas that you can use in your classrooms to apply these principles. And now I'd like to share with you some resources that we have available for you to help you with your teaching. So if you go to Supporting Every Teacher, you can Google it. You can go to our landing page. So this has been created in response to the coronavirus to have all of our resources and materials available for you in one place so that they're easy to find. So if you go to here, just underneath that banner, you'll see free online resources for teachers. If you go to this button and then, I'm going to skip ahead here, it will take you to our resource finder. So this resource finder will show you everything that we have. All you need to do is select the exam that you're teaching. So I've put here preliminary for schools. And I have selected the resource that I'm looking for, a lesson plan, because I'm teaching all these lessons and I need some support. And I click search. Now you can also select the specific skill. I've just clicked search here and you can see all the lesson plans have come up here. There are 35. Not all of them are online. Some of them are our regular lesson plans, but some of them are brand new online teaching plans. And the way that you can distinguish is our online lesson plans have here, I've circled it in purple, online teaching. So those are specifically for teaching online. Now, what do these look like? This is an example of what they look like. So there's one, there are lesson plans for every part of the exam. There's a description, it tells you the materials you need and the aims, and it talks you through lesson stages. Now, these lesson stages can be used in face-to-face classrooms, and then you'll see that there's a column with online options. So giving you ideas of how these options can be, how these stages can be adapted and used while teaching online. Okay, so these lesson plans exist for all levels. So from pre-A1 up to C1. And because we have created these in response to the virus, we're creating more materials every week. So if you have a look today and have a look next week, you'll see that there are more materials next week. We're adding more as we go along to help you continue to be supported. I'm seeing questions. Sorry, how did you get there? So you can get to all of this through our supporting every teacher landing page, okay? Everything you can get to through there. Now, as well as those lesson plans, for those of you who teach B2 First for schools, and C1 actually, C1 Advanced, we also have some brand new materials, which are self-access learning materials. So these are fantastic resources because at that level, students can have a bit more autonomy and a bit more responsibility for their learning. So these plans you can share with your students and they can take them away and they can work through them on their own. Now, if you prefer, you can use them within the classroom. But if you want to give your students extra work, maybe over the holidays or during the week, then you can assign them these self-access learning materials. And they really are very thorough. They go through all the, not just the language, but the skills that students need to develop in order to excel at these levels. And we also have a free interactive support pack for teachers. And within this support pack, again, you'll have links to all the materials that we have, lesson plans, handbooks, speaking videos, activities that you can send your students. It gives you advice on how you can support parents. And it's a really lovely, bright magazine to have a look through.